It's really hard, right? So the only thing I see here. So when do you mow it? Like before Thanksgiving or something?
Funny you should ask. Chris, you wanna? I've always mowed it in the early spring, so that whatever seed is there.
Yeah, that's good too. If it doesn't get too muddy.
Yeah.
The problem with spring is often that it's very. But if this isn't a place that's real wet,
no, it's not.
Then that's fine. Yeah. And in fact, you don't have to do it super early in the spring because most of the things that are good here don't even start doing much until at least late April. And all the cool season weeds start growing in March. So if you wait a little bit longer to mow it, then you might not have some of those cool season weeds put out more seeds. What you do need to do within the next week or two is herbicide all this mugwort.
Okay.
Because it spreads by runner and it's just going to creep into the whole place. And there's nothing good in the mugwort. Right?
And there used to be.
Right. So the whole thing, it's going to just keep going. So you need to get out here with Roundup because you don't have to worry about anything else in it. And just spray it all. Okay?
Emile, do you think that one spraying is enough, or do you think it's going to be more than that?
Well, you can only do one spraying now. This is a good time because it'll take it back down to the roots because it's, late in the season. And then you'll have to see what happens in the spring. If you see it starting to come back, spray the whole thing again. Just kill everything, start over. But you got to get rid of this mugwort. And while you're at it, spray the calorie tear. And if there's good stuff around it, just put a little of the herbicide in a little, plastic dish, and wear rubber gloves, and put a towel in your hand and soak the towel and just paint it on.
And what's that called?
Calorie tear. That's that horrible pear tree that everybody plants along all the roadsides.
Do I call that
Bradford pear.
Bradford pear, right?
Well, it's hard to tell if it's calorie pear or Bradford pear, whichever pear it is, get rid of it. I think. Nice.
The butterfly? Say it again.
I think it's a fritillary, but I'm not sure. Well, you might have baby monarchs, like monarch caterpillars on some of these milkweeds.
Yeah.
But, it's great. It's great habitat.
Okay.
So with ash comes EAB? Is that a...
When we come to ash trees, we'll talk about ash trees.
Okay. Oh, so what did you... That's not... Did you say this is an ash?
Dog
oh, sorry.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah. So look at that. He's doing a nice display for us. See, here's another pair.
Yeah.
So this is the right time.
Or live up in the meantime if the...
But that, that could have been old. But, it's a lot of work, and you got to put it...
You're going back to the Ice Age.
Yeah.
See, now we can take acorns off of this and grow them, because I took about 5 several years back, and I had 2 of these trees growing in my yard. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's a good idea, is to try to grow things from around here. They'll do better, on average,
This would require quite wet.
More elm, swamp oak, pin oak, they all do great anywhere you plant them because they can live without oxygen in the soil because they're floodplain species.
Okay.
So that's why all of our landscape species are floodplain species because they can tolerate anything. They grow slowly. They're not the best competitors, so you don't find them growing in nature in really good soil because they get outcompeted.
Okay.
But once you plant them somewhere, they can grow anywhere.
You might want to make seedlings and then give them out on Earth Day.
There you go.
Get them around the town.
In my yard, I have a couple of swamp oaks and a couple of willow oaks. It took them a few years to get going, but now that they finally got roots out and and you know, now they're growing like crazy. But in nature, they would lose out to things that grow fast, like ash, you know, and red maple and stuff like that.
Do you root feed them?
Huh?
Do you root feed them?
No.
Okay, all right. Just figured
You
that
know
out.
what? If you're not strong enough to survive, goodbye. By illegal poachers. So the ones that have survived and should be doing all the breeding are disappearing from the population. So now we're head starting the babies. There's a couple of volunteer herpetologists and scientists that are doing this massive project, taking the babies and hatching them in the lab and feeding them and not letting them hibernate their first winter, and then putting them back in the spring to where they belong. And they've got a 1-year head start because they're, instead of being only as big as a 1-year-old, they're as big as a 2-year-old. And we think we're going to get them through that bottleneck, you know, where most of the babies die. So because all the really good individuals are being killed by non-natural processes or stolen from the forest by poachers, we figure if we head start the babies, that might be able to make up for it.
What do they poach them for? Resale?
For money.
Resale?
People all around the world want a New Jersey Pine Barrens corn snake because they're the most beautiful sample of corn snake. Yep.
Because I've had smoked snake meat, okay? I just wasn't sure which.
Oh, that's probably
Yeah, I
some
know.
big snakes that they just grow somewhere, you know.
I don't think they're
So this is somewhat good news in that your deer population isn't so extremely terrible that it's not allowing these shrubs to replace themselves. You see how here are young, see these are young shoots of this silky dogwood right here. Right, so this one's lost its leaves already, but they're young shoots. See, they're green. They're just probably this year's or maybe last year's shoots. This is probably second year. So as these old shoots, see, this one's ready to die. See, they only live like 25, 30 years. So as this dies, it needs to be replaced. If the deer are not letting that happen by eating everything that pops up from the ground, then the whole shrub just disappears. So that's not happening here.
And that's good news.
Well, that's good news in that, you know, the last few years, maybe the deer population went down a little bit from some of the disease. I don't know if you had that disease around here, but at least you've got some new shoots. You know, you can go to places where you only have old shoots and the shrubs are about to disappear. Once, see this shrub casts shade. Look, you don't have myelominidbite under it. You see how underneath you have other weeds, you know, and but you also have natives. There's the stuff that pinches here. Help me out.
The green stuff.
The green stuff that feels like fire when you walk into it.
Oh, stinging nettle.
Stinging nettle, thank you. And you have bed straw. You have a lot of native plants here. So, and look, you have some asters, you know, so there's weeds, but there's also some native things. And the main thing is you don't have a lot of stiltgrass and you don't have a lot of myelominidvine because you have shade. Right?
So the
So-
myelominid really needs the direct sun.
Well, I mean, you know, you might get a strand creeping under
Yeah.
here, but it
It's not going to do as
can't
well
do
as
what
it
it's
did
doing out there. Right.
Okay. They're actually trees that we
But if the
planted
deer
out
were
there.
bad, and once this shrub, see this branch died already.
Yeah.
If the deer were bad, once these branches start dying, then everything just comes right in,
Right,
and then you have no chance.
right.
Well, it'd be interesting to know which one it is because it's flowering in the fall. It might be an interesting one. Find out.
The green tea is still
Well, the main thing about doing a meadow is you got to get rid of all the weeds first.
Right.
You got to dig up the land, let all the weeds sprout, dig it up again.
Fill up.
If you're not going to use herbicide,
Rally around the tree.
you got to till it 2 or 3 or 4 times
Really?
to sprout all the seeds in the weeds in the seed bank. And then you can plant, you know, your seed mix, your meadow seed mix with, you know,
Come on in,
use a seed
guys.
drill
We
or
got
you can
shade
just
here.
spread it around and rake it in, whatever. But the biggest problem is not preparing in the first place for all the weeds. That's the biggest problem. You can do everything right, but if you don't get rid of all the weeds in the seed bank, all those cold season weeds are going to come up first in March, and they're going to outcompete everything that you've planted. And that's what people don't do, because they don't believe me. You know. So,
Questions? Anybody have a
I wanted to just say one thing, but I forgot what it was now. Yeah. Look, another swamp oak. I didn't realize there was so much swamp oak along the South Branch here. That's a great tree.
You're in land trust land.
But see, those are the trees that you can plant anywhere. Sycamores, swamp oaks, pin oaks, all the things that grow in the floodplain are the sturdiest. That's a big swamp oak. This is a big red maple, it looks like. But this, we're starting to get into an area that has a few more native species, which is nice. I mean, you're not going to find in this agricultural landscape, you know, all this land was cleared and tilled, and you're not going to find really pristine communities that are dominated by native species, because all the soil was disturbed many times over. But
Can you tell
this
the
isn't
part
bad.
about how New Jersey was completely deforested by the late 1800s?
Well, almost completely.
Almost.
Yeah, you know, the forest minimum was probably around after the Civil War. You know, when
the charcoal or the limestone?
well, so no, I mean, a lot of land was always in woodlot, but the heaviest expansion of agriculture and pastures was probably just after the Civil War. Then people started to move back to the cities. You know, but there were lands that were always cut over and cut over and cut over for charcoal or for just fuel wood, but at least they were never plowed or pastured. I'm talking about lands that were plowed or pastured where the soil was completely destroyed. Yeah, and then you can, once that happens, it's really hard to get a natural community back because the soil's all inverted, it's got a high pH, and it attracts weeds once you have a high pH. Everything that you learned when you were a kid about sweetening the soil with lime and putting in earthworms to make the soil, it's all bullshit when it comes to the forest. The forest needs none of that. That's all bad.
That's good for your neighbor's lawn.
That's good for your lawn and for growing tomatoes and whatever. And growing pasture, you know, hay. But it's not good for native plants. For native plants, you want no fertilizer, no lime, nothing. You just want to make the soil as bad as you can possibly make it, and that keeps out the weeds. Because weeds like all that stuff. Right? The native plants don't need any of that stuff.
Would signs work?
Huh?
Signs? Stay away.
Stay away.
No plants, no weeds.
And earthworms are death for the forest because they consume all the organic material. They leave mineral soil. There's no sponge left. The soil dries out too easily. The soil freezes too easily. Earthworms are not native. They're not supposed to be here. They're all alien species from Europe and Asia. Yeah. There's some native earthworms that are in little out-of-the-way habitats. They don't mean a thing. Yeah. Earthworms are the worst for natural systems in the eastern deciduous forest. For farmers, yeah. No, people brought them because if you want to grow crops, earthworms are good because they aerate the soil. But you're dumping manure and you're dumping this and you're you keep refertilizing. But all the earthworms do is get rid of all the nutrients and all the organic material. They convert all the good stuff in the soil to carbon dioxide. Right? Because they're animals. They're not plants. They're bad. And they don't belong, you know. But we can't do biological control for earthworms because then the agricultural community would go nuts. You know, because then it would kill all the worms and all the people who have worms for the purposes that they need. So, but maybe one will evolve. A nice virus that kills all the worms. That would be great. A 5-foot tree and plant it, it's going to do fine. Right. The harsh winter kills the really young stuff. You know, the stuff that just germinates. Because it doesn't have strength and a big root system. That's why southern plants can't survive here. Once they get big, they're fine. So start planting all the trees that you see that you think are attractive and are in the, if you have floodplain or uplands or whatever you have, see what's native to Virginia, and start planting it.
Really?
Because how
getting
else is
warmer.
it going to get here?
Yeah.
They can't cross interstate, 70 and the Pennsylvania Turnpike and Interstate 64 and Interstate this and Interstate that. Things aren't going to move. This nonsense that things are going to move. The only thing that's going to move are bugs, right? Things that can cross highways. But trees aren't going to move that easily because the landscape doesn't allow for things to move anymore.
So all
it's
this,
all dominated by
all this
people
stuff
and
about
all
the
of our
birds
junk.
and the seeds, and
Huh?
the birds don't fly 400 miles with the seeds to fall to the ground.
Well, I mean, things that are bird dispersed might move a little bit,
Yeah, but not,
but even that, when the bird takes a crap 20 minutes after eating something,
that's 400 feet away.
where's
Right?
it going to land? It's going to land in some farmer's field, or it's going to land on a rooftop of a condominium. It's not going to land in some habitat, right? I mean, most of the landscape is not accepting of anything anymore. Or it's filled with invasive plants. Suppose a bird poops out a seed in your mile-a-minute patch. What good is that? It's not gonna grow.
Right.
And if it does grow, a deer's gonna eat it.
This is very depressing.
So you have to plant stuff that's bigger than deer.
They survive at all.
Red maples, they're casting a lot of shade and they're keeping that mile-a-minute vine at bay. So you have some native plants in here. But look and see what the deer are doing to this cherry leaf viburnum. Here's a nice native shrub that should be 15 feet tall, and it's it's a bonsai plant. Right? It can't get big. Here's one. Let's see. Well, this is. I think that might be I think that's a black cherry tree that's managed to make it up above the deer right here. And you also have spice bush that's